Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Bear League Project, how the heck are you? Really excited about this opportunity. We have Simon Esler with us. He is an ordained metaphysical minister, and he's also done a lot of work with Rob and Ben from Edge of Wonder, several TV series talking about the metaphysical activism. That's a big discussion with Simon, and I find it fascinating, actually, the different layers of information you bring to the table. So I took some notes, folks. I actually went to his YouTube channel. He's got a great YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe. It is, I don't know what it's actually just your name. It's Simon Esler.
Yep.
And
yeah,
I watched, not all of it, but I watched some of your video, and I just haven't had the chance to watch it in full yet because I just found it today. Metaphysical Activism, Dimensions of Disclosure. And you're a great speaker, man. You got on the stage and you started talking. I was like, yeah, this guy's a natural. But you were bringing up different octaves and notes and sounds and different dimensions. So I think we can take this quite deep because there's some things that I want to just jump right into and ask you about. So before we get into that, though, I do want to thank my friends over at patriotcharger.com. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to get one of these things. This is so cool. This thing fits in your hand. This is a 6-in-1 device. As you can see, it's got a seatbelt cutter right here. It's got a glass breaker. So let's say you get into an accident and time is of the uttermost importance. Well, this thing, if you can't get out of your seatbelt, you can cut your seatbelt. You can break a window, get out of the car. It's got several lighting settings. It's got 2 different flashlight settings. It's got an SOS beacon device. It's got also, this is the coolest part, it's got a charger where you can plug your phone into it. So if your battery runs out of juice, you got this thing in your pocket, you take it out, you plug it in, you're good to go. So patriotcharger.com, use the code LEAK15, you get an extra 15% off. That's what I'm talking about. Simon, he's going to order 12 of these, a whole dozen.
Yeah, I'm all over it.
He's all over it. No, man, this is great. I'm really glad for this opportunity. I had a chance to meet Rob and Ben a while back at Disclosure Con in Arizona. Really nice people. And then they had me on the program. It was wonderful. So
that was a great interview.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you all. Checks in the mail. Checks in the mail.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. You're an ordained metaphysical minister. What does that mean?
Okay, so here in Ontario, I live in Toronto, Ontario, here in Canada, and so that means that I have been ordained officially by the government, meaning I have the powers of a minister here legally. It means I can perform weddings and funerals and all these things. But more than that, my training is in helping people find deeper meaning through their lives by understanding the metaphysical context. And I do that without religion, without inserting any of my own beliefs. It's all about meeting people where they're at and then helping them uncover the metaphysical aspects of what they're going through. So I help people through using ritual and ceremony and just guidance that brings them to that metaphysical perspective that sort of frees them.
Metaphysical, what does that mean to you?
So my understanding of metaphysics is first and foremost, the aspects of reality that affect us in a fundamental way, but that aren't accessible to our normal forms of perception. Right? So that means you could look at your spiritual journey as really a metaphysical journey, right? It ties very closely to spirituality, but we can also look at metaphysics from the vantage point of something like a meme war, right? So people are in like digital warfare and meme warfare. Well, that has a metaphysical aspect to it as well, right? These non-physical parts of our experience that carry a lot of meaning and momentum.
So is that the metaphysics of warfare essentially, or is that like a different form of warfare that has a metaphysical aspect?
The way I look at the metaphysics of warfare is that there's essentially like underlying connections to warfare that are always going on. So for example, if we take a metaphysical perspective on biological warfare, we'll actually notice that it's deeply connected to psychological warfare and spiritual warfare, and that there's actually these underlying connections that are always there. And what I've discovered by studying the metaphysical sort of basis for warfare is that it helps us to see forms of warfare that were supposed to be hidden from us. And this is a problem that we know is rampant in our world. There's a lot of secret warfare going on. There's a lot of covert kinds of warfare. And I realized that as I started to study the hidden sort of metaphysical layers of all this, that it was much easier to see all the different kinds of warfare that are going on around me. So the way language is manipulated, the way science is manipulated, all these things are difficult to perceive until you start to look at that fundamental sort of basis of it. And I think and you'll probably understand this, that a lot of work has been done to disconnect us from our intuition, to disconnect us from our spirituality. And I think when we reconnect with those things, we start to understand the world around us better, specifically from the vantage point of how are we being attacked and affected, and how can we defend ourselves and stand in our sovereignty.
Okay. So let's get into the metaphysical activism. I'm on your YouTube channel right now. I'm actually going to hit the subscribe button. So I'm subscribed. This
Thanks.
is, it's a great presentation. Talk to me like you would as you were into this presentation. So this is just,
Yeah.
because I want to hear more about this. You were talking about octaves and like an
Yes.
influence that actually uses it's in a different level. So we may not necessarily see it, but it seems to always be one step ahead.
Totally. Okay. So our existence, beyond the physical existence that we experience, there are subtle layers to our reality, right? So there are very, very subtle layers. And this goes back to like ancient teachings in India and lots of different ancient spiritual texts. They talk about these subtle layers of reality. So for example, one way of understanding this is when we look at acupuncture, okay? Acupuncture is working with these subtle channels of energy that run through your body, and they're actually connected to your etheric body. So not only do you have your physical body, but you have an etheric body as well that is giving information to your physical body. So let's say you're having a spiritual experience, like you're having a moment of enlightenment or higher consciousness. Well, that's coming from a higher realm. That experience, it's going through your etheric body, and then that's affecting your physical body. And that's why, like, when people go into higher states of consciousness, they're feeling sensations of expansion and of clarity. That's arriving through these subtle layers of our reality first, and then into this physical reality. So when I talk about metaphysical activism, what I'm talking about is firstly becoming aware of these subtle aspects of our reality. And that is first, it's done through meditation and different forms of consciousness. And when I talk about extraterrestrial influences, for example, the notion here is that for them to have influenced humanity in the way that they have, they would have had to understand humanity's position in the etheric planes of reality as well, right? So they would have had to be able to perceive us from that different vantage point so that they can undermine our personal power. And the easiest way to look at this is anywhere where humanity lacks awareness is basically an access point for manipulative groups, whether that's extraterrestrial groups or whether that's, you know, sort of elites in the world. The idea is that wherever humanity lacks awareness is where we can be manipulated the most. So by that fundamental rule, I am promoting the idea that we need to become more aware of these subtle realms, more aware of these subtle aspects of our being, because that's where we're often being manipulated and we have no idea. We're not able to perceive it because we haven't put in the work to develop that form of awareness.
So how do we develop it then?
Well, there are lots of different forms of meditation that allow us to access these subtle realms of consciousness. I think one of the strongest approaches that I have found is learning to have an extremely quiet mind. And when you learn to quiet the mind, when you really learn to subdue your internal dialogue and have a mind that is just clear and present, that starts to open up these channels to the more subtle things that are going on within you and around you. So I really promote the idea that people find more internal silence. But also, if you are engaged in, you know, receiving something like acupuncture, or even if you're practicing regular yoga, this is also doing the same thing. So the whole basis of yoga is that you do these postures and this breathing to open up these subtle channels of energy that give you a greater awareness and a greater ability to connect with your reality as a whole, right? That's the whole ancient basis of yoga, is to prepare the body for these higher states of consciousness by getting all these subtle channels of energy like more well aligned and then connecting that with the breath. So, I mean, yoga, acupuncture, and meditation, these all give us greater access to those parts of our body and those parts of our reality.
Now, the chakras are fascinating because I did some research even just recently about the different colors and the frequencies that the colors emit. And the ancients knew very well the crown chakra is a violet. I think the color is violet. And if
Yes.
you look at the frequencies, the highest frequency per color is violet. The lowest, which is in your base chakra, is red. And if you look up the frequency of red, that has the lowest vibration or the densest
Yes.
vibration. So fascinating. And I've seen Trillian photography of the people's auras, and you can clearly see the chakras in some, and then others, you know, they would be like me. My Curlian photograph is like this just dark burgundy. That's it. That's one color. It's like the whole photograph is just boom. And I think I was in the fight or flight mode that day when I had that image taken. So, you know, you could definitely see it with the photograph. But some people, you can see individual chakras and the colors, not only that, but the patterns. So
Yes.
yoga, what you're talking about, does that help align the body to where these frequencies are connected? And what can you tell us about the chakras?
Yes. So the chakras are like a sort of way station between your physical body and these more subtle realms, right? So when you open up a chakra, your chakras are each connected to actually different organ systems in your body. So, and they have specific pathways. So for example, your third eye, while this is the entrance to your third eye, the back of your third eye is actually down here more at the base. So it goes down like this. So they have very specific pathways that connect to different organ systems. So what happens is when a chakra opens up, you're giving that organ system and that part of your body access to these subtle energies that can give you different kinds of information. And one of the reasons why it's important to become internally silent is that this kind of information that can come through our chakras, it doesn't come through in the form of language and words, right? It comes through more in like visual conceptualizations and like holistic concepts. So when you open up your chakras, you're opening yourself up to these different kinds of information. And you know, you mentioned the octaves and um, the musical way that I was talking about this in my Dimensions of Disclosure presentation. This is a good way to look at not only the chakras, but the different layers of reality that we're connected to. Because in the same way that you have these different vibrational sort of frequencies that make up the chakras, you also have these different vibrational layers that make up the realities that we're connected to. So when you're learning to access the different chakras through practices like yoga and meditation, you're actually also opening yourself up to different layers of reality that correspond to like musical notation and colors, because this is all just vibrating light, right? That's the makeup of our reality. So these practices avail you to that. And we need these different forms of information because they're crucial for us to move forward as a humanity. And when you look at it from a warfare perspective, that's intel, right? We need to be able to gather this kind of intel so that we have an advantage as a humanity. And in the ways that we've been manipulated historically, we haven't had access to that sort of subtle intelligence that we needed. And that's how one of the ways we've majorly been manipulated is by not having access to those forms of information.
So then, if you look at the art of war, and you did a piece on this in your series or in your presentation, describing how the best form of war would be to not even physically go after the enemy or something along that lines.
Yes, that's
Can you
right.
describe that and talk about that?
Okay, so the way that I look at that is basically through the law of free will. Okay, so if we're looking at this from like an extraterrestrial vantage point, from like extraterrestrials influencing humanity, where there are cosmic laws that are protecting our free will. So for them to do that, they can't just kick in the door and do whatever they want. They have to find subtle ways to get us to somewhat consent to allowing this kind of interference. So in addition to the laws that are protecting our free will, there's also laws that sort of promote growth and expansion. And the fundamental way that this works is that anywhere where we lack awareness, then we're basically asking the universe for something to come in and make us aware of that part of our reality or that part of ourselves. So any catalyst that comes in and makes us more aware from the perspective of cosmic laws is deemed acceptable. So if humanity at this stage in our evolution lacks awareness of these subtle realms, well then from a cosmic perspective, these extraterrestrials coming in and manipulating us from those subtle realms for centuries until we wake up and become aware of them, that's still on some level seen as a service to humanity, because it's what brought our attention to those areas that we were not paying attention to. So this is one of the ways that extraterrestrial races, they find loopholes in free will where technically it's of service to humanity because they found a spot where we hadn't developed enough yet, and they attack that spot until we wake up to it, and then they have to move on, right? So this is one of the ways they do that.
Now, the cosmic law thing, I've heard that before. I'm sure just about everybody has. And that's one of those feel-good stories where it makes you like, okay, good. There's something out there protecting us. And I hope you're right. And I would like to feel that you're right, but how do we know? Because what is there? Okay, there's cosmic law. Does that mean there's a cosmic judge out there? Does that mean that the divine is going to strike him down with a lightning bolt? I don't know. I mean, what does that mean to you, cosmic law?
Yes. This is a really important topic, and it's important that people understand it. So free will sort of works in sort of like nested spheres, you could say. Okay, so you have a certain amount of free will in this life, right? But how did you arrive here? Well, you incarnated here as a soul. So if we look at it from the point of view of the soul incarnating, well, the soul makes the choice to be in this incarnation, okay? So there's an active free will going on there, but that means that in this life, you're restricted by that choice that your soul made to be here. So yes, you can't fully do whatever you want, but that's because you're confined by the choice to come onto a planet totally saturated with warfare, totally oppressed, like really being micromanaged in lots of different ways. But again, from the perspective that I understand, that was a soul-based choice, right? There was a huge amount of free will poured into that. And by choosing to be here, you agreed to the limitations of that choice. So that's why I look at it as sort of like nested, that your choice, your free will is nested within your choice to be here, and that there are larger forms of free will that occur for the soul that can't occur for you within an incarnation.
So then I want to get back to you being an ordained minister of metaphysics or the metaphysical. So how did you actually get that certification?
Okay, so I started out studying with the Celebrant Foundation and Institute. So that's a school that trains people in the history, the art, and the elements of ritual and ceremony. And so what we did is we studied the whole history of ceremony and ritual to understand, like, what are the fundamental elements of ritual and ceremony that have always been there throughout all religions, throughout all of human history, right? What are these fundamental elements of ritual and ceremony that have always been there, so that we can help people build customized rituals. And that's really important right now for a number of reasons. Number one, because we have lost ritual and ceremony as a people, as a humanity, right? Like, there's been a lot of infiltration of religion, and so a lot of people have turned away from religion, and that's understandable because there is a lot of corruption. But in doing that, we've lost access to regular ritual, regular ceremony. And even from a basic psychological perspective, we need ceremony to move through transitions. When a human being encounters a big set of changes that are really hard to comprehend, ceremony is actually one of the best tools to get us through change and through transition. So I studied this because I really believe that we need a comeback of ritual and ceremony back into humanity, but in a way that is like really our choice, that isn't just repeating old dogma and old tradition, but that brings full consciousness to ritual and ceremony. So I got my certification through them to become what's called a life cycle celebrant. And that was my initial certification. And basically, through the Celebrant Foundation, I got connected to a place called the Bancroft Center for Awakening Spiritual Growth. And that's here in Ontario. And their focus is on metaphysical ministry, on training metaphysical ministers. So there was an affiliation through the Celebrant Foundation that connected me to the Bancroft Center for Awakening Spiritual Growth. And then my training with them was essentially, how do you take a very broad metaphysical perspective that can serve anyone you encounter, so that you're never containing them within your own beliefs or within like an old system of dogma or tradition. So, yeah.
Okay, great. And I'm taking notes as you're saying this. So I got the whiteboard out here. I want to get
Nice.
back. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to get into the free will sphere again. And then I want to talk about what you were just describing, the foundation of rituals with other religions and belief systems, the base.
Yes.
So I think that's fascinating. I want to hear what that is. But first, I want to go to this free will sphere. So I want to make sure I understood this right. You were saying how if you agree to come down into this plane, that there's certain rules and regulations that apply. So even though you've got free will. But when I asked you about the cosmic council that's making sure that these ETs or these beings don't come in and influence us unless we allow them to, so they're looking for these like loopholes or whatever. Why do they need those loopholes still, though? I mean, did you explain that and I just missed it, or?
Sure. You mean like, why do the loopholes exist?
Yeah, like how do we know they're even there? Like how if in all reality, if an ET race wanted to, and they had the technology, what would stop them from coming in here and obliterating this planet?
Right. Okay. So let's look at it from like a microcosmic perspective. When a child is growing up, right, you want to give that child as much nurturing as possible. And, you know, I'm a parent, I have 2 kids. And, you know, as a parent, you want it to be all light and nice and full of love. You want that for them. And yet you watch your children go through really upsetting, challenging experiences. They get, you know, they get taken advantage of in certain ways. They get mistreated by other children. They suffer from bullying, and, you know, they experience forms of trauma, right? Even just being born on Earth traditionally is traumatic. Most births are highly traumatic for the mom and for the child. And that's like just a psychological fact. So when we look at the fact that trauma tends to push evolution, we can see this if you watch the development of any human child, even a human child within the best family setting. They're going to go through forms of trauma that are going to wake them up to parts of themselves that they could not otherwise see. They couldn't develop those parts of themselves without encountering some form of trauma, some form of negative influence from the outside world, okay? So that's like a good basis, right? We can say that that's like something we can assume about the development of a human child. Now, humanity is a relatively immature species, okay? We are like sort of starting to become teenage, you could say, okay? So it means that there are forms of trauma, there are sort of wake-up calls that we had to go through that, that were going to bring us into this greater awareness. But I will take it a sort of step further and say that my understanding is that Earth is like a serious hodgepodge of different soul groups and different extraterrestrial races, right? You have a lot of different races, a lot of different soul groups going on right now. So you have a lot of different paths of development going on. So let's just say you have this crazy mixed bag of groups on Earth, and they have all different kinds of karma and all different kinds of paths of progression. It means that the kind of sort of catalysts, the kinds of trauma that that weird mixed bag of souls would need to wake up would actually need to be kind of cosmic and crazy to help that move along. Just like you're getting a child to progress into adulthood, you have to look at humanity as this sort of child moving into becoming a teenager that is going through these like rites of passage. And this is also why ritual and ceremony are interesting, right? We're going through a rite of passage. Humanity is going through a rite of passage, moving through all this trauma and all these crazy things that we need to use to grow up. So it's a call to maturity.
So I appreciate what you said, and it still didn't answer my question though.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, no disrespect, because this is a tough question. So
it is.
I mean, the question is, what is stopping an extraterrestrial race coming in here and just obliterating the planet if it decided it wanted to?
Right. So I'm a big proponent of, I study the Law of One series. I found them to be like, it's a very sort of, it's got lots of internal consistency. And they talk about this, and they say that basically it would be like hitting a wall for them, right? The opportunities that are available to them are based on their path as well. So it sounds like you're talking about really negative groups of extraterrestrials, right? Like,
or maybe just a group of, like, look at what humans do. My goodness. They're like, we got bigger stuff than you do. We're going to go take your stuff.
Yes, yes. So they're progressing along a path as well, right?
It's called freedom.
Yeah.
I'm just being sarcastic. We'll bomb them to freedom. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have been messed with on a pretty extensive level, but I would say that, like, what are they going to get from that? What are they going to get from coming and just destroying a whole race of people? Like, of what benefit is that to an extraterrestrial race? Let's say, okay.
If they've got, let me jump in on that.
Sure.
Because I kind of feel like we're bouncing off the subject here, and you started up the law of one, law, which is interesting. But so for them, let's say, look, they see this beautiful planet and they see a bunch of people. They're like, you know what? We don't want them. And they've got some kind of like frequency technology where they could just go, and then all of a sudden this frequency would just turn everybody off. And then they would have these machines that would go clean up all the people. And then boom, they've got the whole planet to themselves.
Yes.
What's stopping that from happening?
Because it doesn't give them as much power. They're not gaining as much. So what gives them way more power is actually using us as a resource. It's keeping us dumbed down, keeping us unaware of their true impact, and they just perpetually mine us, right? We're like beasts of burden. This is a much more intelligent way of enslaving a planet, of utilizing a planet, than just coming in and like mass genocide, and suddenly they're left to do all the work, all the mining, all the whatever they want to use this planet for, right? This is why, like, when you look back on a lot of different like alternative sources of history, it looks like humanity was used as beasts of burden. We were forced into mining the planet for gold and all these different things, right? So my understanding is that these groups benefit much, much more from enslaving us in these subtle ways. Think about it. If a species thinks they're free and is at the same time doing your bidding, you get to do a lot of hands-off just manipulation. They're doing a lot of the work for you, and they don't even know that they're doing the work for you. To me, that gives them a lot more power than just wiping out races and running around the galaxy.
I understand what you're saying, and I could see how clearly they're wanting to maximize results. So when people talk to me about how the elite want to reduce the population because of the Georgia Guidestones, I think that that's a stretch. Now, certainly, I mean, if you read through the Georgia Guidestones, a lot of what it says, it could be describing a post-apocalyptic world after a comet hit. It's not saying wipe out 99% of the population and then go. But at the same time, when it says keep nature, keep the human population within 500 million people at the very first testament, I could say, okay, I get that. That's quite, why not have that be number 10 and number 1 be like, be good to each other, help out nature, get rid of petty officials, stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I get that.
Yes.
So, but with that being said, I still wonder sometimes why that hasn't happened already. And then what you're saying reminds me of why it hasn't happened already, because they're maximizing results, and each person that they get, they can maximize that person. If they figure out how to recycle their soul, they can get them in that soul trap. And do you talk about that in your metaphysical aspects of warfare, how it can actually bring somebody into a reincarnation cycle because they went into war and then they realized after the fact, they're like, wait a second, this wasn't what I thought it was.
This is a super important subject. So, and it relates to what we're talking about, because the sort of enslavement of the soul, or you could look at it as the suppression of the soul, from my studies, is like a major, major tactic being used, right? So the idea is that the human body needs to have a certain level of health to bring the soul's consciousness into full activity, right? And what we want as a humanity, we want our soul's free will to be as fully active as possible, right? You want your soul's willpower to be in the game full force, right? That's what you want. You want to make sure that your soul is as fully incarnated into this body as possible, so that whatever you came here to do, you can do it. Now, this is harder to do if you have a body that is vibrationally out of tune, if you have a body that is sick, if your blood is, dirty, just like the water around you is dirty. That makes it much more difficult. So when I look at like the enslavement of the soul, the way of trapping the soul, when you look at books like Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars and the Toronto Protocol, they talk about trying to stimulate humanity's physical experience in a way that suppresses the soul's presence, and that keeps the soul out of the picture. So if you live a life of like excessive physical pleasure and you really just like indulge in nothing but like sex and abundance and like sort of abundance in like a really imbalanced way, so like overeating and manipulating others for personal gain, this actually can suppress the soul's presence in this reality. And that's what I understand to be one of the major tactics. So if we're looking at like, let's say you have a soul group, like people talk about this with the Kennedys a lot, that it looks like the Kennedys are like a soul group because like, people keep incarnating as different Kennedys along this family line, and they keep going up against the same cabal of people. And you have this like family line, and it's like, well, outside of this life, you look like you have a soul group that keeps coming back here and they're fighting this war. So souls are trying to bring their missions, their willpower onto this planet. And if they can keep souls shut down, if they can keep bodies unhealthy enough or overindulged enough, then the soul is out of the picture. So I understand that to be a major part of this. And the more people that keep incarnating here from these soul groups with these positive missions, the more the oppressors of this planet are up against just sheer willpower, right? Just the pressure of like building willpower of all these groups trying to come in and trying to elevate these bodies and to try to complete these missions by bringing their soul's mission, their soul's awareness into the picture.
Very interesting. Thank you for presenting it that way. And I'm thinking about how frequencies are so important. And if we studied frequencies in science, we would probably understand a lot more than we do today if that was the main focus, or one of the main focal points. However, with that being said, these frequencies, I was presenting something the other day on the channel, the project, where I showed these frequencies. And I said, okay, is the frequency the puppet master, and the matter, the physical matter, the object is the puppet. So this frequency is controlling this object. And I want to go more into, I want to dive deep into how you mentioned these beings being able to influence through these different factors. How do they do it? Is it technology? Is it their DNA? Is it a combination of the two? Who are they? What are they? Where are they?
Yes, definitely. Okay, so I mean, there's lots of different testimonies alluding to lots of different groups, right? But you could look at, let's say the Draco. People talk about these like draconian reptilian beings, okay? And you talk about them being very aggressively psychic, okay? So they're very well developed on the mental planes. So you have like a mental body. There's a mental plane of existence where we have the development of the mind, right? You want to strengthen, as an individual on earth, I'm looking to strengthen the clarity and the power of my mind. And I want to develop my mind so that it's clear and so that I can use the power of my mind to manifest things physically in the world. But I have to understand that I have thoughts first, everything is a thought first before it becomes a physical thing in this reality. So think about them understanding that and being extremely advanced in like mental telepathy and in the ability to create like powerful thought forms. Imagine them doing that to an undeveloped humanity, like, 1,000 years ago, where if you go to, let's say, a race that's just starting to develop here on Earth, and they come in and they have these mental powers, these abilities to operate on the mental plane before we're even aware that there is a mental plane of existence, they're going to be able to actually, it's like you said, they can do that puppet work from a vibrational aspect. They could literally just plant a very simple thought form into like a civilization, knowing that in 100 years, that thought form is going to grow into something that doesn't serve us, but serves them. They understand that in a much greater way. And you can look at that too from the level of like, a lot of these races, they have the capacity to time travel and to look at different points in a timeline, okay? So a race like this that's very developed mentally, They can come, they can insert a set of ideas, very powerful ideas, and they can track how that's going to affect the human race in 100 years. And they can tweak this. They can make these little subtle manipulations to timelines that create these results. And until we have awareness of those things, again, we're just, like you said, we're just puppets to these more subtle, vibrational, different layers of reality that they've known about because they're ancient. And that's part of the problem, right? We're dealing with much more mature species who have been alive and developed way longer than humanity. And it just puts us at that kind of disadvantage. And they're very skilled at enslaving planets in these subtle ways that just get us to do the work for them by just not really being aware of what we're doing and who we are. Oh, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I was trying to hit the unmute button, and there was it said, "You're talking and you haven't unmuted yet." This screen, I'm like, wait a second, I know I'm trying to unmute right now. Get out of here, you silly screen. Yeah. Okay, so this is very interesting because now I'm thinking about the 100-year scenario that you brought up, like this thought seed that could last for 100 years. And what about religion and how powerful religion is that can affect entire family lines for generations?
Yes, exactly.
So talk to us about that. And then the Draco, I don't know about enough about the Draco to give anything but an opinion. What I will say is I've heard a lot of other opinions and stuff, but I've never actually seen one of these things come down and be like, and freaking all of a sudden morph into a 14-foot white dragon that's got these big fangs and it's like lightning bolts coming out of its eyeballs and stuff like that. I haven't seen that yet, but it could happen. But the reptilian phenomenon is fascinating because there's so many people from around the world that have claimed to see these reptilians, and then even the artifacts in Iraq and Mesopotamia from ancient Babylon that are 7, 8, 9,000 years old show these reptilian bipedal beings. And they actually are being motherly. Like this one in particular is nursing her child. So it's not evil. It's not mean. It's not wicked. It's just, it is what it is. And I wonder if you also connect and I want to get your take on this, dinosaurs. I mean, my goodness. Hello, maybe there was a dinosaur or a race of beings that were around at that time that were reptilian in nature that were also very smart.
Yes.
Why is that far-fetched? With all the stuff we've been lied to about already, which has been proven, so they're like, oh, this is science. This is science. Well, yeah, your science is, it's your science is crap, buddy. And then you'll have information that is just the complete opposite spectrum that you can verify and duplicate, repeatable results.
Yes, absolutely. I think, all this kind of information, there's two practices that I put into place that I want to mention really quick. That number one, I try to go off as much of my personal experience as I can. And I'm an experiencer. I have had experiences that have opened me up to some of these things as a real part of reality. But you do have a lot of this that is like very out there. And so I find this knowledge has to be held very lightly. It can't be about like trying to force this as the truth. It's more about holding the knowledge lightly and doing lots of research, right? So, you can look at modern testimonies about like reptilian kinds of beings, right? There's lots of like whistleblowers and experiencers out there, but it's like you said, you can also trace it back to ancient civilizations. You have all these depictions. You have people like the Hopi talking about these little sort of reptoid beings that have always been coming up out of the earth, that's like a normal part of the Hopi people's depictions of history, right? So you have things like that. And so I find that to be very interesting. Now, I think in terms of whether we have positive or negative beings, that, like you said, it looks like there's also depictions of maybe more nurturing influences from some races that we might assume are negative. And I think you're right. All races, as far as I understand, are just like humans. You got good groups, you got bad groups. It's free will, right? People choose their path. So even within like different sort of reptilian kinds of developments of species, then, of course, there's going to be both groups. In terms of the idea of course, a reptilian race could advance into an intelligent race. Well, I think it's Dr. Stephen Greer that talks about this, about morphogenic fields. And that, you know, we have these information fields that there seems to be a morphogenic field of that, what do they call it? The 5-star form of the hand, the feet, and then like just the body. So you have the 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, and then the 5th star is the body itself. And that morphogenic field, that informational field of how bodies develop in this galaxy, it seems to be something that's repeating just based on like the study of all the different experiences that people have had throughout history, in modern times, in ancient times. That form seems to be common. So I think if you look at the study of something like morphogenic fields, then you start to have some scientific basis of, okay, I can see how this would affect the development of life throughout our galaxy. We have like a scientific postulation that we can begin from, and then you can match that up with testimony and see like, hey, what makes sense here? How does this fit together, you know?
Okay, then I like that. Thank you for that. So let me get to the question about the foundation of rituals.
Yes.
That's something that you focus on. And I actually had a guest on yesterday talking about rituals. So that seems to be the matrix sync right now. It's amazing how this is linking up at these times. It must be important.
Yes.
Basketball players, football players, great athletes, they oftentimes have quick rituals before, you know, they shoot the foul at the foul line or some type of activity that they're doing. Now, I'm not a big sports person, but I used to watch basketball, and I remember Karl Malone, shows my age, but back in the day, Karl Malone would always do the same thing with the ball, and then he would shoot it. And people like didn't really understand that, but it seems like the hypnosis aspect of ritual kind of goes hand in hand. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, your body can be programmed to your advantage. You can use repetition, conscious repetition, to program your body into greater health, into higher states of consciousness. And you know, I had a personal experience with this that really woke me up to this fact. I study with an ordained Tibetan Buddhist monk here in Toronto, and she gave me a series of spiritual protocols to follow to experience higher states of consciousness. And one of the protocols was meditate on something beautiful at the same time every morning and the same time every night. And keep it at the same time and keep their same focus. So let's say you could meditate just on a seed. You hold a seed and you meditate on the beauty of that seed. Or you could do it with a tree, or you could do it with a candle, right? Anything that you're going to be able to anchor your attention onto that you're able to appreciate the beauty of. So what the interesting thing I found was that when I was doing this practice, I started at 9 a.m. every morning for my meditation, and then 9 p.m. every night for my meditation. And, you know, when your life gets busy, sometimes you may be 5 minutes late or 5 minutes early, whatever. Like, it wasn't like extremely rigid down to the minute. So what I would notice after I started doing this for a couple of weeks was that, let's say I'd be a little bit late and it would hit 9 o'clock and I wouldn't quite be ready. I actually felt my body starting by itself to go into deep meditative states, even if I was like finishing up chores or doing something else. That first 5 minutes from 9 to 9:05, whether or not I was in the practice, my body started doing the practice. And then I would sit down and engage it properly. So I started to notice that I can actually program my body to hit higher states of consciousness on a regular basis if I actually use this kind of repetition. Our bodies are really well designed for this. So, you know, when you look at something like that, when you're using the times of day, well, our body is tuned into these circadian rhythms. Your pineal gland is tuned into the night and day cycles around you. Well, you can use this tactically. And so when you design rituals for higher consciousness, your body will play along. Your body will play the game, even if you take a break. And I did do this. There were times when I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do the meditation today, and I'm just going to watch how long this state stays with me. And it was really incredible because I got to experience higher states of consciousness, but just doing different things like washing dishes or like going for a walk or like writing something, but it would be actively the same state of consciousness that I had experienced when I was like meditating deeply on something beautiful.
What is a higher level of consciousness then? Describe that to us if you can.
So that to me comes with greater perspective. It comes with greater clarity. There's a level of calmness that settles into the body. So a really good way to understand this is the studies they did at the Monroe Institute, where they found that when the body got to a certain level of calmness, the actual rhythm that the heart would go into would create a standing wave throughout the body. So because it was like this really slow heartbeat, it would create these really deep, elongated standing waves that actually would tune the body into this vibration. And so these long standing waves would start to create that vibration in the body, and your brain eventually would sync up to that, and your organs would sync up to that, and you move into this different state of consciousness. And that comes back to frequency and vibration, like we were talking about, that literally when you're in a meditative state, in certain meditative states, the actual rhythm of your heart is creating a frequency that's going to draw your body into this state. And it just so happens that some of those states actually also match up with some of the vibrations of the planet itself. And you literally do become more vibrationally attuned to the earth in a lot of ways. And the Monroe Institute studied this deeply. And then the CIA studied everything the Monroe Institute studied as well. So this is like well-known, insider circles and, within outsider information.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I got the series, the Monroe Institute. I had the CDs, then put them on MP4s. Great information. And then
Amazing.
also, like you said, the CIA.gov/vault. If anybody wants to read the declassified files, that's where you can pick them up. And they're about Stargate. They're incredible.
Amazing.
There's a lot of details. Yeah, man.
Yeah, really amazing. Yeah,
So,
I was recently talking about that actually in my series, because if you look at the way the CIA talks about it, they talk about subtle states of consciousness. They talk about super refined states of consciousness that are accessing what they call more refined universal energies. And that when the human will and the human focus is refined down to these subtle states, you access different parts of reality. And I mean, these are the words of the CIA. They're talking about the subtle layers of reality occupying these.
and imagine also if there are beings on another planet or, deep underground in their resort underneath the earth, their 5-star resort, then they could communicate, and there's also been, okay, this is getting deep, because there's been science fiction books written in the 50s and 60s. I think Heinlein was writing about this. Richard Heinlein. There was a book specific about these beings on Mars that were like the ancients, and they were underground. A Stranger in a Strange Land. That's the name of the book. It's an old book, but it's a classic. And I didn't read the whole thing. I got kind of bored when it started talking about how this guy was doing stuff in the circus, because I'm reading this in 2010. I'm like, circus? Come on, man. Because you could tell it was written in the 50s, right? But it's still kind of a timeless book, because it was describing these beings, the Martians on Mars, and how they live deep in the planet. And they were almost in a hibernation state where they could communicate telepathically with different beings, but they were also, their lifespans were so long that when things happened on the outside, it didn't really affect them, because they were hunkered down. It was just a different vibratorial state. So this person lived on Mars, and so he was and they kind of adopted him in a sense. So he was kind of half Martian, half human, but he was of the DNA origin of human, but he thought along the ways that they did. And what you're describing now, I feel, is that where science fiction meets science reality. Folks, imagine now, put yourself in the position of an entity that is very wise, ancient, and it has a connection where telepathically, just like we're communicating via voice, it's doing it in a telepathic state, and it could go anywhere at any time. If you've ever had an out-of-body experience, which I've had many, I'm sure you have as well, just by talking to you, that you're more than your physical body. So these things are communicating, and maybe we are being influenced by beings on another side of the universe, for all we know.
Absolutely. I think that's a distinct possibility, because I think the more you get into these different states of consciousness, the more you access non-locality, just the non-local nature of consciousness itself. That just becomes a reality of what's going on. And, as you said, we've both had experiences with that. And, I like to think of it this way, that you have these subtle planes of existence. And yes, on the one hand, you've had different races and different agendas manipulating us through there. But like you said, on the other hand, you also have more positively oriented beings that are waiting for moments of contact that are maybe not physical, but instead they want to do it through these subtle planes of existence first. Because my understanding is that that's actually a more gentle way to introduce yourself to a species, right? Wait till the species gets into this higher state of consciousness, and then very gently make contact with these subtle layers of existence, and then lead up to full-on physical contact. right? So in the same way that the negative groups have gone through those subtle layers first, you also have positive groups going through those subtle layers first to try and, respect our free will and lead us to that physical contact in a way that is the least traumatic.
Right on. And so what are you doing with full disclosure? That's one thing that's really important to you. I know you've
Yes.
got the podcast on your YouTube channel, and I'll leave a link in the video description box so people can subscribe, and I'm sure that they will. But your website, as of right now, it might be my server. I clicked on it, and is it with Wix?
Oh yeah, it's not really functional. Yeah, there's like a problem with it right now, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was
It's
there.
better to go to my Facebook and my YouTube and my Instagram are better right now. And I'm gonna have to get my site built out, like fixed later.
Yeah, cool. No, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you knew about that. So the Facebook page, they can subscribe, the YouTube subscribe, and then also your
Yes.
series are with Edge of Wonder. So you've done some great stuff with Edge of Wonder as well.
Yeah, and I'm really that's really where I'm pouring all my focus and my research and my energy right now. So I have a series on edgeofwonder.tv. It's called Worlds Within. And this season, the focus is on the metaphysics of warfare. So a lot of what we've been talking about, getting, a better understanding of all these metaphysical perspectives that make up the different kinds of warfare that are going on all around us. We're surrounded by biological warfare, psychological warfare, spiritual warfare. Then you have the more overt, violent forms of warfare that have to do with like weaponry. So, warfare has taken many, many forms on Earth throughout humanity's history. So my understanding is that karmically, if you have something that's coming back to you again and again, that's because you're still learning from that thing. We've all had that in our lives. You have a lesson that comes back and you're like, oh man, this thing's happening to me again. Okay, I need to learn. I didn't learn the lesson last time because this thing is back, right? Well, if you look at humanity as a collective, we keep going back to war, back to war, back to war, right? So what do we need to learn to get past this? So a lot of my studies in Worlds Within is about understanding those metaphysical layers so that we can mine the wisdom from this and get past this sort of need as a species to be in constant warfare. So that's what the sort of bulk of my really hard work is going into Worlds Within right now. In terms of full disclosure, this has been a really cool opportunity for me to follow my passion for full disclosure through, because I really see full disclosure as like a spiritual practice that it begins with you, right? Becoming fully self-aware, right? Full disclosure on that individual level is becoming very transparent, very honest with yourself about who you are and what you need to work on. And in the same way that we develop that personal kind of transparency and honesty and authenticity, that to me is collected or connected to the collective realization of all the suppressed information coming out and humanity becoming more transparent and having more access to truth. So I see a serious connection between that personal journey and the collective realization of that. And, I know you've talked about this before, that if we can get that with a small group of humanity, a 10% of humanity can get to that point of realization, it will create a cascade for everyone. So I see full disclosure from that perspective, that it's like a bridge between the individual and the collective.
Even religion describes, especially in Revelation, which is probably one of the most famous books of scripture in the world, but it talks about how there's going to be peace, and the person that brings peace is going to be the one that brings world destruction. So there's even a mindset with hundreds of millions, over 1 billion people, and even to this day, because I was raised Christian and read the Bible. I think I read the Bible from front to back, from cover to cover, when I was in my early 20s. And then I've read certain books multiple times, like Revelation. I probably read that 36 times at least. But anyway, so even me, now that I've broken out of that paradigm, I still wonder, is there going to be someone that brings peace around the world and then everything's going to get blown up? So it's like, that's embedded in the psyche for generations. And, thinking, oh, peace is not good, because if we have peace, then we have a Borg system that takes control of us. That's the mindset of many people, whether they want to accept it or not. Subconsciously, that's what you are going to believe if you fall in line with certain scriptures and beliefs and religions. And
Yes.
I'm not saying that's good or bad. It is what it is. Like I said, I'm still, I think, somewhat connected to that mindset, that apocalyptic mindset that goes through my head.
I think there's been a lot of social engineering to create that mindset. I think you know, it's of benefit to certain elite groups that come from a very sort of dark spiritual philosophy. My understanding is that a lot of these like very religious elites, their belief is that humanity cannot handle its own freedom. And they operate from that belief. That's why they feel it's justified to enslave humanity, to do all these things to keep us trapped, and, you know, all these different kinds of warfare. They're coming from the fundamental belief that we are not mature enough to handle our own freedom. And we have to prove that wrong by becoming spiritually mature enough, by waking up to what's going on, by handling our freedom like spiritual adults.
Now, do you do courses? Do you do stuff on Skype? If, you know, people
Yeah, I do one-on-one work with people. So I do, like, as a minister, I'll do like metaphysical guidance. So basically help people find that where they're at metaphysically, what is the metaphysical context of your life, and then how can you use that to build a life that's more aligned with your values, more aligned with your goals, you know, and that helps you live a life of greater integrity and greater transparency. So I'm very passionate about that, about making practical life goals, but also spiritual practices through ritual and ceremony that can really help you program the life that is uplifting for you.
Okay, great. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, they can get a hold of you via Facebook, YouTube,
Instagram,
and then cool. They just send you an email. Perfect. All right, man. Yes. Well, let me ask you then, and finishing up here, and I got to say, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too.
Right on. What would you give to the audience, words of wisdom for this transition, this shift that many of us are dealing with right now, 2020? It's like the land of opportunities, the year of polarities.
Yeah. You know, I think we really need to do a lot of work to find family, find community. These are fundamental forms of human unity that we need to come back to, that I think during really difficult transitions, when things get really turbulent, you know, when you can find family and you can find community, that creates the kind of environment that lets you keep higher consciousness throughout trauma, throughout turbulence, right? I don't think we can be lone wolves on this. So, and family can mean different things. That could mean your immediate family, but that could also just mean the people that you've come to realize the truth with, the people that you've been on this journey of discovery with. Perhaps that's more family. But if we intentionally seek family and community right now, I think we're going to set up these sort of spiritual ecosystems that let us keep these higher states of consciousness, keep this more clear, loving state of consciousness, even as things get more difficult and more challenging. So I really want to promote that. And I just released an episode on Edge of Wonder on the metaphysical dynamics of the family and how we can use higher consciousness and spiritual practices to benefit from that and to use that to progress as a humanity.
Right on. As soon as we get done talking, send me those links via email. Those are going to be in the video description box, ladies and gentlemen. So click the link specific in the video description box if you'd like to see those videos. Also check them out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and
edgeofwonder.tv.
Yeah, edgeofwonder.tv. So leave me that link specific, so that way they can get access to that. And tell Rob and Ben I said hello. Last time I talked to them, I gave them a tinfoil hat, and they wore it on one of their episodes, and people were like, Rex, I got to get one of those hats, man. So I was like, thanks, Rob and Ben.
Yeah, those are dope.
Yeah, they're pretty. I'll tell you, man, they really are so nice. I mean, they're handcrafted. They're like, each one you look at, you're like, okay, I can tell this, the fabrics that Julian uses and stuff like that. But it was so cool when we started that, because we were originally, when I talked to Julian, I said, Julian, you know, you've got your own, he's got a shop in the UK. So he does graphics, he does big banners and stuff for cars and wraps. And, you know, he's got a well-established business. And just to be nice, he likes League Project, and we were talking a little bit. So he sent me out a prototype of what looks like a tinfoil hat. And it wasn't real tinfoil, but it looked like a tinfoil silver. And that was after I had the aluminum foil duct tape hat on with a biocosmic energy sensor right in the center of it, you know, the big whopping energy plate. And so he sends me out the hat. I put it on. I'm like, this is great. So I'm like, let's start doing this. Let's start, you know, maybe we could offer some hats for people, do real limited numbers. And this one guy sent me out some Litecoins when Litecoins were just smoking hot, you know, and he's like, here you go, Rex, I want you to have this. And I was like, man, that is so kind of you. And so I wanted Julian to do something with, that would block radiation, right? That would block EMF radiation. whether it's cell phone radiation or 5G or 4G or 3G or whatever. And he sent me the hat, and there was no liner in it, but I thought that it was already like the fabrics were already going to block the EMFs. So I told my this guy that sent me these Litecoins out, I'm like, hey, yeah, man, let me send you out a hat. It even blocks EMFs and stuff like that. And and then I found out that it didn't. So I was like, wait a second, Julian, dude, we gotta come up with something to block EMF radiation, man. I can't send this hat out to him that doesn't. I told him it did. So Julian's like, all right, let's work on it. So we find these fabrics, and these fabrics are specifically designed to block EMF radiation. So he got the ones that block the lower radiation and the higher frequencies, and he merged them together. So the liners are cool now. So then I was able to send it out to this gentleman that sent me some Litecoins, and he did it out of the kindness of his heart. I just, after I told him we were going to get him a hat that blocked EMF radiation, I was like, man, we better make sure to get this done. So now we literally have hats that block radiation. We've got cell phone covers that are like Faraday cages. We got shirts. We got boxers. We got scarves that can also be like a face mask and stuff. It's really neat to do that, because instead of being scared,
yes,
be prepared. Instead of bitching about it and complaining about it, do something about it. Be innovative. And that's what Julian and I did. And, anybody can do it now most people can do it now.
And I think too, it's such a cool symbol that you've created, because that whole stigma of like the tinfoil hat that has been used to try and like stigmatize the community of truth seekers, and has to try, it's like a character assassination that's been going on about anyone who seeks the truth. And I love that idea of just flipping it and owning it and being like, yeah, damn straight, I'm wearing this. Absolutely, I'll wear a tinfoil hat because I know what's going on.
Where's your tinfoil hat? Well, I got several of them. Which one do you want?
Yeah.
It blocks radiation too. You're on your phone all day long. Where's
exactly?
Like, well, I got a cell phone right up above my head. I got a cell tower right above my head. I got a router that I sleep next to. I feel great.
Well, right on, Simon. Once again, really appreciate it. Let's do this again in the future. Hope things get successful for you over there at Edge of Wonder, and keep the change, man.
I absolutely will. Take care, and I love the work you're doing. Keep it up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. Have an amazing day. Be excellent to each other. Check this guy out. Oh, wait. I got to do it that way. It's like, all right, everybody.